It's 8 a.m. and you're watching Fox 31's Good Day Colorado.
At 8:06 right now, every year millions of Americans struggle with eating disorders.
So the question is, how do you know if there has been a problem in your own home? We're going to talk to an expert coming up next.
Well, good morning to you out there as you're getting your Thursday going here at 8:10, looking over downtown Denver. More than 11 million men and women in the United States struggle with an eating disorder. So how do you know if you or your children are genetically predisposed to an eating disorder? And also, what can you do to avoid triggering that? Dr. Ken Weiner, the co-founder of the Eating Recovery Center, joins us live in studio this morning with more. And it's great to know that we have a center like this right here in Denver.
Well, thank you, Peggy. Yeah, no, we're really proud of the center. It really is a national center of excellence. So we treat people from all over the country with severe eating disorders, anorexia and bulimia primarily.
Which is a brutal disorder, and it's not just about being thin, looking good in clothes, not that sort of thing. It actually is a real emotional disorder that can be deadly.
Absolutely. Anorexia nervosa, highest death rate of any psychiatric illness. If you have anorexia nervosa, you have about 0.5% of dying every year. If you have the disease for over 20 years, a 20% mortality rate, and half of that is from suicide.
Unbelievable. Why is it so deadly?
Well, I think in part because it's so difficult to treat. You know, we now know that there's a very strong genetic component. So 40 to 50% of the risk of anorexia nervosa is genetic. It's as inheritable as schizophrenia and bipolar disorder.
And we were just discussing, is it possible that more men get, or not more men, but men do get anorexia and bulimia, but you say it's really mostly women. So if you're looking at maybe a teenager who has anorexia, perhaps also look at the family members and see if anybody else does.
Right, especially in families where there's a strong genetic component, where mom or sister has had the eating disorder, it makes it more difficult for people to come to attention very often.
And most people don't think of this as having anything to do with genetics.
It's true. It's true. Most people think it's due to the media, and certainly the media plays a role. If you look at the study Ann Becker did in the Fiji Islands, where she went and visited before Western media, there was no dieting. Going thin was a term of concern, not a term, compliment. She comes back 3 years later, and 40% of women are on a diet.
Interesting.
So it's clear the media can affect.
Okay, so we're talking about family history. Also, you say that there's a trigger, that you actually can avoid having any kind of triggers. Let's say somebody might have this predisposition. How do you prevent them from getting it?
Well, what I like to say is genes load the gun, life pulls the trigger. So if you never go on a diet, high likelihood you never become anorexic, just like someone with the genes for alcoholism who never drinks would never become an alcoholic.
But that's hard to do, especially with social pressures, and if you have even pressures in your own family. If this is genetic, you see a sister who's very thin, maybe a mother who's very thin, how can that not be a trigger?
Well, given more than 60% of young women are on a diet at any given point in time, you're right, Peggy, it is really difficult. I think what people should remember, though, is diets don't work unless your definition of success is the 10% of people who are successful in their diet 3 years later. Almost none of them are successful.
Very interesting. Okay, so if you have somebody that you know, maybe what if you're just friendly with somebody who you think is extremely thin, maybe has some characteristics of sort of odd eating behaviors, what can you do?
Well, it's really important to have them evaluated with someone who understands and knows eating disorders well. Here in Denver, we have a lot of expertise, both at the Eating Recovery Center. There's a unit at Denver Health for severely ill patients. So we really have a lot of expertise. We would welcome a call from anybody.
And what are some of the things that you might recognize about somebody who might have anorexia? I had a very close friend who suffered from it. She would eat gum and coffee, and that was about all she had. Or is there kind of hallmarks of behaviors that you might notice or recognize as anorexia?
Well, people with anorexia, in terms of their hardwiring or their temperament, tend to be perfectionistic, anxious, compulsive, high-achieving, usually really good people with a serious disease.
Okay, and it is very serious. As you just said, it is the most deadly psychiatric disease that one can have. All right, so the center right here in Denver, if you do have concerns about somebody that maybe is displaying